Indonesia's capital is sinking. Because of this, Indonesia is even in the process of relocating its capital. No joke, in 30 years more than half of Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, could be submerged under seawater. Today, let's take a proper look at this issue. Let's get right into it. Before we start, it turns out that 70% of my viewers still haven't subscribed. I would be really grateful if you could please hit the subscribe button just once. Right now, Jakarta is literally sinking. Jakarta is home to over 10 million people. There are 10 million people living in an area of 661.5 square kilometers. Because so many people are living in such a small area, problems like economic inequality and rising housing prices are happening. But the biggest problem is this: rising sea levels. The situation in Jakarta is really serious right now. Every year, the city is sinking by an average of 7.5 centimeters. To give you an idea, the World Economic Forum has predicted that up to 95% of North Jakarta could be underwater by 2050. Jakarta is located on wetlands at the mouths of 13 rivers, and it's an area facing Java. It's also a region that frequently experiences floods. On top of that, more than 10 million people live there. Because there are over 10 million people, the land keeps sinking. Right now, almost half of the city is already below sea level. These changes are something the people of Jakarta can feel in their daily lives. There's a building in the Muara Baru district, but now only part of the second floor balcony can be used. That's because the first floor is flooded. The house itself is sinking, so the only solution is to abandon the building. Some buildings are repeatedly buried by sand. Because of this, the Indonesian government has decided to give up on Jakarta and move the capital to another region. That place is Nusantara. Construction of Nusantara began in the second half of 2022. Like Jakarta, it is an independent city. Actually, the plan was to move the capital there in 2024, but in many cases, construction hasn't even started yet. Because of this, the planned relocation in 2024 has been cancelled. The goal is to complete Nusantara by 2028. According to Indonesia's land ministry, the cost of the capital relocation plan is about 466 trillion Indonesian rupiah, which is roughly 40 trillion won. Development is ongoing and covers about 4.2 times the area of Seoul. However, there are too many issues. The plan is already delayed by about 4 years from the original schedule, despite a 40 trillion won budget. Private investment is sluggish. The Indonesian government said that 20% would come from the government budget and 80% from private investment. It's been quite a while since COVID-19 ended, but still, the situation hasn't improved. As foreign capital has withdrawn, the government is now directly covering more than half of the budget. As of 2025, it's said that less than 10% of the planned site has been developed. In fact, in some areas, construction has even stopped because the supply of materials has been cut off. On top of that, this isn't about redeveloping an existing city. It's about building a city from scratch in an area covered with dense tropical rainforest. They're clearing the whole rainforest to build the city, so environmental groups strongly oppose it. Around the indigenous villages, large-scale logging has damaged the forest, and some residents are protesting, saying the compensation isn't enough. Because of this, although the goal is to move the capital by 2028, it's uncertain whether they'll actually be able to do it by then. Meanwhile, Jakarta will continue to sink and suffer damage. Of course, Korea is watching the development of Nusantara carefully. You might be surprised, but they say that Sejong City is the benchmark for Nusantara. Indonesia actually benchmarked Sejong City and even asked Korea to share various technologies, including management and administrative technologies. Of course, Indonesia has stabbed Korea in the back more than once before. Korea is approaching this situation with a cautious attitude. Some major construction companies have submitted technical proposals for Nusantara and begun initial contacts, but few have actually signed contracts or started construction. There may also be a lack of trust in Indonesia. Companies aren't aggressively joining the Nusantara project due to uncertainty about profitability, institutional risks, and local financing conditions. That's right, so Korea is taking a rather cautious approach. Then, why is Jakarta's sinking such a serious issue? The sinking is serious not just due to rising sea levels from global warming, but also because Jakarta residents are over-extracting groundwater for drinking and other uses. It is said that tap water purified from river water is not supplied to most areas, and since it's not suitable for drinking, the majority of Jakarta's citizens rely on groundwater. As you all know, that's the problem. The more this groundwater is used, the more the ground sinks. Indonesia is trying to come up with countermeasures by building artificial islands and a 32-kilometer-long seawall along Jakarta Bay to prevent flooding. Unless all Jakarta citizens who continue to use groundwater are stopped, it seems unlikely that sinking can be prevented. In other words, unless the fundamental problem is solved, the issue will not be resolved. Experts are warning that by 2030, the situation could become irreversible. The Indonesian government has been pouring in a budget of about 1 trillion won every year, but all of these efforts have failed. Because of this, as I mentioned earlier, they are abandoning Jakarta altogether and relocating the capital. And when it comes to moving the capital, the most important thing is that Indonesia's total population is about 270 million, Over half of the population, 56%, lives on Java, where Jakarta is. The capital region is nearly as concentrated as Korea's, causing regional imbalances. Also, currently, 60% of Indonesia's economy revolves around the island of Java, where Jakarta is located. To solve these problems, they are planning to move the capital to Nusantara. Currently, Kalimantan Island, the site of the new capital, is one of Indonesia's underdeveloped regions with poor infrastructure like roads. Progress is stalled, so it's unclear if the project will move forward. The Indonesian Audit Board warned that allocating so much budget could threaten the country's fiscal stability. At this point, we must highlight something important. It's the outcome of countries that have tried to relocate their capitals in the past. There are hardly any cases where moving the capital solved a country's problems. In fact, it often created new burdens. First, let's look at the case of Myanmar. In 2005, Myanmar moved its capital from Yangon to Naypyidaw, creating a planned city with wide roads and huge government buildings. But reality was different. Naypyidaw became mostly a city for officials, while Yangon stayed the economic, diplomatic, and financial center. Businesses and capital also stayed in Yangon. The same happened with Brasilia in Brazil. In 1960, Brazil moved its capital from Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia. They aimed for balanced national development, but the economic center still stayed in São Paulo and Rio. Brasilia centers on political elites and officials, while citizens' lives and industries remain outside the capital. After moving the capital, Brazil still faced high costs for upkeep and infrastructure expansion, and regional imbalances persisted more than expected. Although the capital was moved, there are evaluations that the structure of the country itself has hardly changed. The capital was relocated, but the heart of the nation was not moved. Only the administrative functions were separated, and the country ended up with a dual structure. The common point of these cases is clear. Relocating the capital doesn't automatically disperse population, and the economy and capital move more cautiously. People and money don't move by order. Ultimately, moving the capital often just shifts the problem instead of fixing it, which is why experts say this. They say few countries have successfully relocated their capital. You can build an administrative capital, but making it a true capital is much harder. This is why Indonesia's decision is seen as both a bold move and a rather risky gamble. Now, let's look at the outlook going forward. To give you the conclusion first, most believe that Indonesia's capital relocation is much more likely to fail than succeed. The reasons are clear. First of all, there is no time. Jakarta won't wait. Although Jakarta sinks over 7 centimeters annually, Nusantara is not yet developed as a city. The longer the capital relocation is delayed, the more damage Jakarta will accumulate, and the budget needed to handle that damage will only continue to increase. Ultimately, this structure forces the country to pay for both building a new capital and maintaining the old one, which seriously harms national finances over time. The financial impact is significant. A capital city lacking private investment is incomplete. The planned private investment structure has collapsed, increasing the government's financial burden. When large-scale, long-term projects continue in a situation where there isn't enough fiscal capacity, there is a high possibility that budgets for welfare, education, and infrastructure will eventually be sacrificed. In this case, relocating the capital could turn from a project to enhance national competitiveness into a project that holds back growth. Also, while government officials can relocate, it's different for citizens and businesses. If jobs, education, healthcare, and markets don't move together, a city can't truly come alive. Nusantara still doesn't have enough jobs, industries, or basic infrastructure for daily life. If forced relocation continues, the new capital may stay empty, while Jakarta remains overcrowded, creating imbalance. Countries that failed at past relocations couldn't overcome this second stage. The main issue is political risk. Moving the capital can't be done by one administration. If each new government changes priorities, the project will keep starting and stopping. In Indonesia, political differences over Nusantara are actually widening. If this situation continues, there's a possibility that Nusantara will remain an unfinished capital, a stalled symbol. In the end, Indonesia is currently facing two risks at the same time. Jakarta is sinking, and Nusantara remains unfinished. If either issue isn't properly resolved, the country will face long-term instability. Relocating the capital might seem like an escape, but often it becomes an even bigger challenge. Indonesia now faces that crossroads. Whether this choice becomes a survival strategy or a decision that increases the nation's burden will likely become clear within the next 10 years. What do you think about Indonesia's situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments. That concludes this video. Thank you.